We're here at Big Brutus today. It's Tuesday, March the 12th. And we're here with Carmen Boccia, and he's going to tell us a story. Go ahead, Carmen.
Okay, my name is Carmen Boccia, and I'm here to talk about Mine 19. This is where Big Brutus is located. Big Brutus was a big part of Mine 19, but it wasn't here half the time, or half of Mine 19. Mine 19 lasted 23 years. Big Brutus was a part of Mine 19 for 11 years, so it's almost half Big Brutus was a part of. And I'd like to start when I was born and go through. I was with Mine 19 the whole time it was in operation. And I will start when I was born, and the story will end somewhere when Mine 19 ends. So,
all right, good enough.
We'll begin. I was born in 1933 in West Mineral, Kansas, Friday, October the 6th, at home with a midwife. My grandparents were both migrants from Italy, and they came through Ellis Island. They didn't crawl under the fence. And, that was my grandparents on my mother's side. And I only got to know one of them, and she died. It was my grandmother. She died when I was 6 years old. My grandfather died when I was 2 months old. And that was the only grandparent I knew. Was one grandmother that died when I was 6 years old. My dad was born in Italy, so I'm first generation on one side, second on the other. My mother was born in this country. Her parents were born in Italy. And they all came through Ellis Island. In 1933, Prohibition ended. FDR was president. He became president in 1932. And my grandfather, being Italian, he was busted twice during Prohibition. Prohibition was from 1920 till 1933. It ended in 1933, the year I was born. And he had a bunch of wine broken up in his home place, in a wine cellar at home. They came in, busted up kegs and bottles and wine and everything.
And that was the sheriff that did that, right? That was the county sheriff.
Whoever was in charge. This was between 1920 and 1933. See,
you think it might have been the feds that did it?
I don't think it was the feds, because you read 100 years ago in the Columbus paper, the north end of Cherokee County was notorious. It wasn't only my grandfather, it was about every Italian.
Yeah, there was a lot of bootlegging going on.
Yeah, not only Italians, but every other ethnic group that came from Europe got busted too. So, and that was one occasion, and then there was another my mother told me about. I don't have any details on, but it had something to do with Cherokee, Kansas. And he was over there. I don't know what he was doing, but they took a 1927 Studebaker away from him, so he lost a new car, plus what he got busted at home. Okay, in 1938, I went to the first grade. FDR was the president. And this was during the Depression and Dust Bowl era. I don't remember much about it. I think I remember a little bit about a dust storm one time, but I'm not quite sure. 1941, I was in the third grade. FDR was in his third term, January the 20th. 1941, I was still in the third grade. FDR was the president. December the 7th, Pearl Harbor, and World War II started December the 7th, 1941. 1942, I was in the fourth and fifth grade. FDR was the president. 1945, I was in the sixth and seventh grade. May the 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered. Truman was president. That was when Truman became president. The first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. And Nagasaki later was bombed, and the war ended with Japan August the 14th. During that period, 3 boys from Mineral were killed in World War II, others injured. 1947, I was in high school. Truman was the president. 1951 high school, I graduated, and P&M was closing Mine 15 at East Mineral, constructing mine number 19 preparation plant near Hallowell, Kansas. And we have pictures of that Mine 15. It was a preparation plant, and it lasted from 1928 till 1951 when it closed down, the year I graduated. And they were in the process of moving their business from East Mineral to Hallowell, or the Hallowell area. And luckily for me, I mean, jobs were kind of hard to get that time, you know, for a kid just out of high school, and they were doing construction, and I managed to get a job at Mine 19 during construction. I graduated in May. Truman was still the president, Mine 15 closing, and Mine 19 under construction at Hallowell. 1951, I got a job with P&M in June. At that particular time, it was a different era. There was no TV, no FM, no computer, no internet, no cell phones, no microwaves, no plastic bottles, no PVCs, no satellites, no space junk. I had never seen a TV program when I went to work with P&M Coal Company.
Do you remember the first time you saw a TV?
Yes, I did. And it was later that year. It was the fall of 1951. I was in Lawrence, Kansas, and we'd went to a bar or somewhere, I think probably a bar, and seen that they had a television in there, and I seen it. And they said it was being broadcast from Kansas City at the time, and it was snowy, and I know I wasn't impressed with the story because I was used to movie-told news and all that stuff at the theater, you know.
Sure, you're paying your dime and seeing movies every week. You were going to the movie, I'll bet.
Yeah, and they'd have serials, you know. We'd either hitchhike to Columbus on Saturday, or at that time the mailman come through, and if you give him a quarter, he would haul you to Columbus in the back of his pickup or his truck. He was enclosed, and then he'd go
I've heard that story from other people, that they rode with the mailman.
Yeah.
They'd pay him a quarter. Marianne, my Aunt Marianne, rode to Parsons for a quarter.
Yeah.
from Weir or Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a method of transportation for us, you know. Then we go to the show in Columbus on a Saturday, and then by the time the show was over, he'd come back from his deliveries from Joplin or wherever he went, and he'd pick us up at the post office, and away we'd go back to Mineral, you know. And other times we hitchhiked, you know, and it wasn't like it is today where there's a car zoom, 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 you know. Especially at night, you know, if you got out of the show at night, we might walk for miles before a car ever come by. They'd pick you up, but it'd be quite a while before a car would pick you up. Wasn't much traffic. So. Okay, I got the job with P&M in June. Mine 19 was under construction. I got the job as a laborer, and boy, I'm making big money. Pay was $1.25 an hour, $10 a day, and we got time and a half on Saturday and Sunday. So that meant on Saturday and Sunday, and we worked 7 days a week because they was wanting to get back in business of producing coal. And at that time, we've got pictures of Mine 19 around here. I think about half the steel was up. It wasn't completed, nothing enclosed. And McNally, Pittsburgh furnished all the wash boxes and everything. And that Mine 19 was designed for 3,000 tons per day. And that whenever, later on after it got into production, whenever we would hit 3,000 ton per day, and that was kind of rare, the company would throw a party, you know, and they'd have it catered from Pittsburgh for the employees. And I might mention, you know, times were different. There was never any women worked at Mine 19. It was all men all the time. So.
Now, did you have women in the office?
None in the office even.
Oh, okay.
So it was $80 a day for 7 day week before taxes. In 1951, again, they were getting ready to produce. The coal uncovered for Mine 19 was dug with the 950B and a 10W Monaghan. And the 10W Monaghan was a walking drag line, diesel electric. And it, I think the crowd and the hoist were mechanical and the swing was electric. Because when I first started in the electrician end, I can remember the electrician who was teaching me, he changed some brushes on the swing. And also, you've heard of Claythorne Lodge?
Yeah, right there nearby,
Okay,
not
well,
mine 19.
all them pits around Claythorne Lodge was dug by 10W Monaghan. So
Okay. 10W Monaghan. Is
10W
that the
Monaghan. It was a diesel electric drag line, 10 yard, and it had a diesel engine in it that was. I mean, you could practically count the revolutions, or they said you could, you know, and it had a real pleasant sound when it run, you know, because it didn't run high speed, it was low speed. Must have had great big cylinders or something, I don't know.
So this is a diesel electric, the same thing that they run trains on today, a diesel running a generator that ran the equipment.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have to been a very big generator. I mean, I think just the swing was electric. So they would have had to have, I think there was either one or two swing motors, and I don't remember which. But they would have had to have a generator hooked to the diesel that would big enough to drive the generator for the swing motors only.
It's interesting to me to watch the progression of technology.
Yeah,
how you go from steam engines, or you go from, you know, nothing, you know, and develop different mechanical to where you get to a steam engine, and then you work to the different progressions of different kinds of motors and mechanisms you use to get things done. And this diesel electric is very interesting.
And also the diesel would be for the lights because they operated 24 hours a day. You know,
oh, I see, sure.
Diesel the generator would be for the lights and the swing motors. That's what I think. I'm not quite sure on that because I didn't spend much time on it because there wasn't much electrical maintenance on that. You know, there's no cables to move or anything.
It was all contained within the machine. Everything electrical was contained within the machine.
Yeah.
Which is a big difference from Brutus, where you brought in the electricity from the power plant. And the only motors on Brutus were electric.
Yeah. Okay, we said the Claythorne Lodge was dug, all the pits around Claythorne Lodge was dug by that 10W Monaghan. And in 1951, Mine 19 loaded coal for the first time in September. And when they loaded coal, I still hadn't seen a TV program.
Now you say Mine 19 loaded coal in what year?
It was in September 1951.
Is the first time that
first car of coal was loaded in
for P&M Mine 19.
Yeah, Truman was the president. Okay, and so when Mine 19 was constructed, like I said, I was a laborer, and that's what they did with me. I dug ditches and I helped pour concrete and helped do that. Wherever labor was needed, we'll let get me, you know, and another guy or more. Okay, I held different jobs, all non-union. These were called exempt jobs. If you did certain jobs around the mine, you had to be in the union, you know. But different jobs, non-union around mine and other P&M properties. At that time, they were shutting down Mine 18, which are still some remnants over here. You've probably seen that red tile building over this direction. It's a Mine 19, or it was a Mine 18. And Mine 15 over here, you heard them shots a little while ago?
Oh, were they shooting this morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear it, but
they're testing, but that was years ago. That was old Mine 15, where they loaded the coal to ship to Mine 15 cleaning plant.
Well, we hear shots out here at the underwater lab.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about was blowing this morning?
I don't know.
But we still have, even after we've closed the ammunition plant and different things have closed and backed off from what they were, and the mining's not going, we still have explosions now and again around here.
Yeah.
And they're testing explosions and different things.
That's where they used to test them, or where they used to make them. In fact, that's where P&M made them when they made their own, was an old abandoned Mine 15 property.
I see.
And we did work for the laborers if they needed something done at the abandoned property, something moved or whatever. The laborers went and done that in Mine 18, which is over this way. And in 1952, the 750B shovel, which had a counterweight, and the counterweight is like that model up there where you see that model, that 750B had a counterweight also, like that one. That is a model of a 1050B Bucyrus. And we had a 950B that looked almost like that, and it was at mine 19. Anyway, they dismantled this 750B in 1952, and this 750B was dismantled less than a mile west of where we're sitting right now, and I helped dismantle it. And when I talk about the 950B, it was built less than a mile east of Big Brutus in 1938.
And this is the machine that Brutus replaced?
Yes.
This is the one, and how many yards was its shovel?
It was 33, and I've read the book Kenneth and Helen Spencer of Kansas, and in it he says at the time it was built in 1938, it was the largest shovel in the world. It was 33 yard, and it dug its way toward mine 19, and eventually when Brutus was constructed, it dug its way back to where within less than a mile from where it was constructed. So where we're sitting right here is just full of history of coal mining. So you can go a mile west and you can see pits dug by the 750. You can go a mile east, you can see pits dug by the 950, and right in front of Brutus is pit dug by Brutus. You go a mile and a half east of Mineral, there's a pit dug by another shovel that I don't know the size of, because that pit is about as old as me. We used to fish in it when we were kids. And
But
then,
you dismantled 950, then you were saying. You and the laborers went over and you worked on dismantling 950? Is that what I'm understanding?
no, not the 950, the 750.
The 750.
750.
And
The 750 was the one dismantled right behind here. And it was also a 75B loader, which was an electric loader. I forget how big it was, but it was an electric loader. We dismantled them too, right, like I said, less than a mile west of here, and they were sent to Kentucky, and I was still making $1.25 an hour at that time. And Ike was the president. Okay, in 1953 then, started working for the lab, and I was catching coal samples and preparing them for testing in the lab, and I was making $1.40 an hour.
I got a raise.
Yeah. And at that time, Coal Age magazine, and we have a copy here in the museum, came and did a feature story on mine 19. I think it was, in 1954, I got a job as a prospect driller at $1.75 an hour, and prospect driller drilled for coal to see where the coal was.
Wait a minute. You said $1.40. Would you get $1.75 an hour as prospect
That
drilling?
was, I got $1.40 when I was taking lab samples.
Oh, I see. And prospect drilling was different.
So I got a raise. So
Okay.
when I got the prospect driller, I
Making
got
big money
35,
now.
yeah, $1.75 an hour. And Ike was president. In the winter of '54, I was sent to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, with an air drilling rig mounted on an Army 6x6 truck through the Rocky Mountains.
This is an Army 6x6 with a drilling rig on it that Carmen used and drove to Steamboat Springs, Colorado for P&M. This is Carmen in 1962 working for P&M. He's 28 years old here.
And I hadn't driven a truck through the Rocky Mountains before, and this was in the wintertime. So this Army 6x6 truck was pretty good size and had all the equipment mounted on the back of it. And got stopped in Byers Canyon. I don't remember what highway it was. It might be Highway 40, but I'm not sure of that. And in Byers Canyon, there was a flagman stopped us, For what purpose, I don't know. They were doing something to the road, I guess. But anyway, while I had my foot on the brake waiting for the flagman to let us go, my brake pedal went clear to the floor. And the truck started moving. And the guy down, the flagman says, pull over there. And I pulled over there and stopped. Well, it didn't have any brakes. And so it was 8 miles from Byers Canyon to Kremling, Colorado. And I thought, well, I'm here in the middle of nowhere. I can make it to Kremling, Colorado for 8 miles, surely. And I'll just drive slow and take it easy and get there. So from Byers Canyon, it was all uphill, and that wasn't too bad. When I got up to the top of the hill, it was downhill, and I thought I'd shift down to a lower gear and see what happened, you know. And so I was doing all right for a while, and then the truck started picking up speed, and I thought, well,
That's tough, you know, downshifting while you're going downhill.
Yeah.
And you've already started picking up a little speed.
Yeah.
And now to downshift at that point, it's real easy to get stuck and not be able to get into that lower gear.
Yeah.
You've done good getting it into a lower gear.
well, I don't know whether I got it into the lower gear or not. Things happen so fast.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, the transmission didn't last.
I imagine your mind was going faster than the car.
So
Holy
there went the transmission, so there was no brakes and no transmission, and going downhill in the Rocky Mountains. And so luckily, I must have been not too far from the bottom before I started going up the next hill. And it was getting dark, or it was dark, because I remember I had the lights on. And as I was going downhill, I noticed a ditch off to the right side of the road. And then I got to the bottom of the hill. Of course, I went up the next hill as far as the truck would coast. And then it started coasting backwards, coming downhill at night with no brakes and no transmission. And so I thought I'd just, well, cut it off into the ditch. So I just turned it into the ditch. And then I managed to call a wrecker from Kremling, Colorado. I don't know how I did, whether they had roadside phones there at the time or how communication. But anyway, pretty soon here come the wrecker, tied onto it. He couldn't pull it out. So he had to get another wrecker. So they got 2 wreckers and got it pulled out. And they pulled it to Kremling, Colorado, and luckily there was somebody there that could fix the problem. And I spent a week in Kremling, Colorado, and then drove on to, after it was fixed, I stayed in Steamboat, but the mine was actually in Milner, Colorado. It was 52 miles from Kremling to Steamboat and 11 miles to the mine. And when I worked at the mine, one of the foremen lived in Steamboat, and he would pick me up at the hotel, take me and bring me home. Anyway, after that was over, which is about a month, I drove back to Kansas and resumed the job that I was doing. Well, in 1955, the line foreman, Ralph Douglas, asked me to go with him on a job where he climbed the pole. And now at that time, the linemen they had working at Mine 19 were older guys that had come from Mine 15, and they were retiring. Well, there was none of them left. And the mine foreman was the only one left. I mean, not the mine foreman, but the line foreman was the only one left. And so he asked me to go with him. He would do the climbing, and I was to haul material up to him or on a rope, rope hoist. And so I said, well, I'd like to try that. He threw me a set of hooks, and he said, there you go. So he taught me how to climb, give me a lesson or two.
Set of hooks, those were the things that hooked to your boots.
Yeah, and I learned to climb, and that was my ticket to a union job anyway, and I could kind of see the path. That's where the big money was.
Okay.
So it wasn't long.
Now, how old are you now?
How old am I?
At that point there.
1955, I would have been 22. 33 and 22, 55, isn't it? 22.
This is Carmen Boccia on an electric pole running the electric line in Hollowell, Kansas, in preparation for the construction of Big Brutus. And you can see there on the right the crane that was used for the construction of Big Brutus.
Anyway, learned to climb. That was my ticket, like I say, to a union job. And at that same time, I joined the MWA in 1955 with the lineman classification. I think the pay was $2.40 an hour or less. I think $2.40 was probably pretty good. It might even been less than that, but I think it was around that anyway. And in that year, that's when the first fatality happened at Mine 19. The groundman on the shovel on that was the 950 at the time, was pulling up the cable beside the shovel, and he was pulling it with a D4 cat. Now we have a D4 cat that's just like the one that he was using, and it's down there by Brutus, and it's got a canopy on it. The one he had didn't have a canopy on it, and he was pulling this cable. Of course, he's looking down at the pit, he's backing up, he's looking down the pit at the cable as he's backing up with the cable. And this is the power cable I'm talking about. And backing up, and at the same time, the operator was undercutting the trees. There were some trees in the area we were digging. He was undercutting some trees. And as he got close enough, here one of them trees come down and killed him instantly on that D4 cat.
Oh boy.
That was the first fatality. At Mine 19, there was 2 total. The second one, I don't remember exactly the year, but he was a mechanic. He was killed while changing a tire on one of the haul trucks. And I don't know how many pounds of pressure was in them tires. Maybe
now, these are the only 2 fatalities at Mine 19.
Only 2.
During, how many years was Mine 19? You said like about 22, 23
years.
23 years. Compare that to the deep mining, where many, many men died.
Oh, yeah. It's,
it was a regular thing that a guy would get killed in the deep mines. And here, 23 years they operated these strip mines at Mine 19, and there were, you could say, only 2 fatalities.
Yeah. Another figure you could use is tons produced per fatality, and
oh my. That's even bigger.
Yeah, the strip mines would be even larger, because the second largest explosion in Kansas happened probably less than 5 miles from here in 1916 at a deep mine. And there was 26 men and boys killed at that mine.
Stone City.
In Stone City, just.
Fidelity Coal, was that?
What's that?
Was that a Fidelity Coal mine?
I have no idea.
I know they were the major mine in there,
Yeah,
but
there
there
was
were
one.
others. There was Western and a couple others in Stone City.
You look at the map there, and you can see how many mines are in and around there.
Well, I have the information on the Stone City disaster. I'll look that up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there were deep mines, or remnants of deep. When I was a boy, the remnants of deep mines. There was only one deep mine that my dad worked in, and he worked in it from, I think, about 49 to 52 or something like that. And this ventilating fan is the last one remaining we have outdoors here. And that came from the mine he worked in. It was called Cherry Creek Coal Company, and it was about 2 miles east of here, 2-3 miles east of here. It was right across from Mid-America Pipe, about a half a mile into there, north. And I think it ceased operation in 1952. So there I was, and Ike was the president at that time, and John L. Lewis was still president of the United Mine Workers when I joined. We got John L.'s picture up there. And he negotiated a 3-year contract. I think that was the last contract John L. negotiated with the coal companies for 25 cents an hour raise over 3 years. So we got a quarter raise over a 3-year contract. Got a dime, and a nickel. So if I was making $2.40 an hour at the end of 3 years, I would be making $2.65.
Well, that's when $1 was $1, though, I guess.
Okay, 1956, I was promoted to second-class electrician, and I worked with first-class electrician Ray Charlton. At this time, there were no second, third shift electricians at P&M. You know, the day shift electrician covered the whole works. You know, he went home and well, basically the shovel or drag line went down. Well, he went back out there and fixed the problem, then went back home. But I started working with him, and he started teaching me the trade. And Ike was the president. And also, P&M got the 770B. It was a 21-yard drag line that replaced this 10W Monaghan. Mm-hmm. So the 10W Monaghan dug till 1957, and if you talk with Claythorne Lodge, they can tell you probably exactly when their pits were dug, you know, and so it would have been before 1957. Mm-hmm. And so it replaced the 10W. And I helped wire that 770B. It was built right there at Mine 19. October the 4th, 1957, and I know where I was exactly at this particular time. Russia put Sputnik in orbit. That was on a Friday, and I was going to a football game in Oswego. Mineral was playing Oswego, and I was still a football fan. And I was listening to the radio and said Russia had put the Sputnik in orbit. And I was taking call-outs in 1958 alone, covering the 950B. So Ray trusted me enough to turn me loose. So instead of him running out at night, I had to run out at night. And you know, it didn't make any difference what kind of weather it was, you know, whatever. They call you 2 o'clock in the morning.
But at that time, were you glad to get a call out? You got extra money for it.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You said, oh boy, here's some overtime?
Yeah. I got a minimum of 2 hours overtime when I went.
Yeah, that phone rang, you had to see dollar signs
Yeah,
there.
a minimum of 2 hours. You know, if I was lucky and it was something I just had to turn a switch and put the power back on and I'd go back home, man, that was really nice, you know. That was kind of rare. And the poor old lady in the Mineral still had a central office, you know, where you plug in everything. And so they'd have to get her out of bed. I think she was in her 80s probably, and they'd have to get her out of bed, and she'd get me out of bed. And so,
Who's her?
what?
Who is her?
Mrs. Prater was her name. She was the central telephone office.
Oh, I see. Okay, the switchboard was...
Yeah, switchboard operator.
Okay.
I mean, she lived there with a switchboard, you know, so.
And where would she have been, in West Mineral?
Yeah.
So they had a phone line to West Mineral from 19.
Yeah. Well, if you look at that 1913 picture of West Mineral, there's not an electric line in it. All them lines are phone lines.
You know, that's amazing too, that you talk about her being, there's a phone line from there to there. They can use you said there was no microwaves at this time. Microwaves are used in communication now too, where you don't have wires going coast to coast.
Yeah, you're wireless.
You have microwave
wireless.
signals, yeah. Not only just in cell phones, but for all calls. There's.
Yeah, we strung some phone line. In fact, from Mine 19, Ralph Douglas I was talking about, and me, and I think there was one other guy. We strung a phone line from the mine to Hallowell. Hallowell was the same way at the time. You know, they had a switchboard, so we strung 2 wires from Mine 19 over to Hallowell to the switchboard over there. So, and they used to talk about talking through the ground. Sometimes they just string one wire and they'd use the ground for the other wire, you know, to drive a ground stake. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was taking call-outs alone covering the 950B. There were some harrowing times there too. 1959, I was electrician second class, 770B, and Ike was president. And our 5th child was born. I was 25 years old, and she'll be 65 April the 2nd.
That was your youngest.
That was youngest of the first family. Yeah, I was 25 years old, I had 5 kids.
Oh, you had 2 families.
Yeah, but the same woman though,
Okay.
14 years later.
Okay.
Okay, I was taking correspondence courses from ICS, International Correspondence School, later CIE, Cleveland Institute of Electronics. Now, the company was real gracious. They would pay for your correspondence courses, but there was only one catch. When you paid for them till you got the diploma, and then when you got the diploma, you could show them the diploma and they'd reimburse you. So that was an incentive to keep going.
Yeah, they weren't wasting their money on somebody that wasn't going to finish.
So then we'll move on to 1960, the second class, line, maintenance, call out, so forth. 1961, 950B was still in operation, 770B, 85B, and line work. All machines I had to work on, cable change and maintenance on these machines and call outs. April the 17th of 1961, Cuba and the Bay of Pigs happened. Kennedy was president, and Cuba and the Bay of Pigs. And then in 1962, I was first class electrician, and that's when the Cold War really picked up in 1962. And I went to do routine maintenance at the shovel one morning in 1962, and all this going on. There were people building fallout shelters and everything at that time, and it was getting hectic, and we were getting worried. And the guys at the shovel were talking about whether to go back home or not, and I got in a discussion with them, and we talked about, whether we'd just shut the mine down and go home, because we thought it was going to happen that day.
Well, this is the time during I'm a baby boomer. They call us baby boomers. I would have been 12 years old. We were in school and we were doing drills
duck
for
and cover.
nuclear attack. We were to get under our desks and get in the fetal position and
I was duck and cover for kids.
duck and cover, yeah.
And I've got some emergency food. At that time, the United States put emergency food all over the country. It was survival crackers in 5-foot tins, and I mean, they were all over the country. And later on, I managed to get 2 of them, and I've still got 2 of them at home. And one of them was opened, and I thought I'd test it. This is less than 2 years ago. I tried it, and it wasn't all that palatable, but it would still be edible today, I think. If I was real hungry, I'd probably eat it. But if you want to check it, I'll give you a bite.
Well, I'd like to see them. I'd like to see what you're talking about.
Okay, we were talking about the fallout shelters, and we talked about the Cold War and discussed about going home.
People were building fallout shelters all over the place.
Yeah,
People were building them in their backyards.
I know people that build them.
Yeah.
History might repeat itself. Never know. I've got survival crackers if they do. So you're welcome to share them if you want to.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Carmen.
Okay, 1962, we were preparing for Brutus. Bob Weiss, Jim Lovell, and me built the power line where we put the substation. We also built the substation at the site. And we met Harvey Wright, the Bucyrus Erie engineer. And that's when we first met him. And you can see from the pictures on the wall, the progression of everything. That was when we first met him. And I showed you the picture where the crane hadn't been erected yet. It was parts of it laying on the ground. Well, I think Harvey must have put that up too before Brutus come in. Well, then Brutus started coming in. 1962 crane, and it was the brand name was Clyde. We called it Clyde, and all the ties. You see how many ties they had to do just to erect that bottom half. Okay, in 1963, parts were coming in, laid down, and electricians were getting overwhelmed at that time because we were helping on Brutus, and we were building power line and doing the maintenance, and there was no second or third shift electricians. It was just the 3 of us at that time. and have to take call outs at night besides. And I mean, they were really overwhelming us, you know, as far as work was going. Kennedy was in power at the time, and they talked about the moon rocket, about going to the moon, when Kennedy was talking about going to the moon. And they needed a rocket transporter. And if you've ever looked at that rocket transporter, it is the undercarriage of a shovel. And Harvey Wright told us at that time, this was in right after we met her, 63, that Bucyrus area was bidding on this contract to build this rocket transporter for the moon. And so was Marion Power Shovel.
Now, this was the thing that Cape Canaveral that took the rocket from the hangar to the launch pad.
Right.
And you're right, it was on a track, wasn't it? And I think
it has hydraulic jacks. It's actually
very much like what Brutus is.
Undercarriage of a shovel. But Marion Power Shovel got the contract. Bucyrus didn't get it, but Bucyrus had bid on it because Harvey Wright told us. Okay, here's another thing. Let's see, 1963. This is still 1963. Of course, Harvey was stuck there with Brutus, you know, and he got a card from his wife. It must have been Valentine's Day, and he was proud of that card. He was showing it to us, you know, and I'll never forget it. On the front of the card, it showed a candle in a window, and on the front of it, it said, "I'm keeping a light in the window for you, but," when you open a card, it says, "If you don't come home soon, we're both going out." So here he is, stuck with a big erection in Kansas, and she's in Wisconsin. Okay. 1963, I got to work with GE and BE electrical engineers. Boy, hoping something would rub off on me, you know, some of the knowledge them guys had. And there were several of them, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 total. And Jerry Stone became a good friend. He was a GE engineer from Kansas City, because I think this area was his area or something, and he was from GE, Kansas City. And I was on there when the generator sets were started for the first time, and they were concerned about a voltage drop. And we had a phone there, and I said, well, I'll call my wife before you start them up and have her watch the television set and see if she can detect any difference when we start the generators. And I called her, and then we started the generators, or they started the generators for the first time. And there was no voltage drop, or my wife couldn't see any change in it. You know. But then the motors they were started one at a time. They wouldn't started together. The 3,500 horse motor started one at a time. And we did electric checks on the generators, or they did, and I got to sit in with them on all them. And Brutus takes its first bite, and that was in 1963. I don't have the exact date, but I was there. And they dug a while, and they decided additional ballast was needed. Now, in the brochure you see on Brutus, I think they claim it weighs 11 million pounds. I always called it 12 million because there's actually 1,200 ton of Brutus, or ballast in the back end of Brutus, 1,200 ton total. Now, I don't know how much they had in at that time, but they determined they had to add some more after they dug for a short while. And so they got extra ballast, and they shut down and loaded it. Now, the way they determined if they need more ballast was like this shovel back here. They would raise the bucket up empty and push it full out as far as it would go. And then they would check the pressure on each jack. And if the pressures on the front jacks were heavier or more pounds per square inch or cubic inch or whatever it is, then they meant they needed more ballast in the back to balance it up. So,
Now, I missed something. How do they measure that they're
well, they have a hydraulic gauge. They have gauges on each.
hydraulic? It has
Yeah,
built
on
into the
on
system.
each corner, and so evidently it was tilting toward that way, so they had to add more ballast to bring it like that, so make it. And I got to restore this machine. Boy, this is a wonderful little machine here too. And,
The little giant.
what?
The little giant,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
call that.
I got to restore it and rewire it over to Empire Mine. And when it come time to do that, I did the same way on what they had said about Brutus, And I poked it out, and of course didn't have gauges on it, but this thing will jack up just like Brutus, but it's hand, And I could let all 4 jacks at one time by turning the valve, and if it come down like this, well, I knew it needed more weight, so I added more weight. The builder had put all scrap iron, there was old spark plugs, there was all kind of stuff in the back in there, and it had rusted over the years, and I took all that out. And then when I went back, I made a big piece of lead when I determined how much weight it needed, and that piece of lead's in the back of that.
Now, did they add a piece to the back of Brutus for ballast, or did they just add it inside?
Yeah, that's something else I should have covered. These were 35-pound pig irons, and there again, I think we've got a sample here somewhere. It was pig iron, and I think it weighed 35 pounds each. And I remember when they were building Brutus, there was a hell of a stack of it, right behind Brutus, and then they added more of that pig iron. And then when Brutus became a museum, we had to sell the ballast. We didn't need it anyway. We didn't have any money, that's the thought. But well, I know exactly how much ballast we got in there. It's 1,200 tons. So to me, I imagine that, and I'm guessing that 11 million pounds they talk about in the brochure, they probably weighed or knew the weight of every piece they made there, and in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Sure, they weighed it as they shipped it probably too on the trains.
Yeah, and I don't think that included the ballast. I could be wrong, but I don't know. Okay, where are we? Well, see, 1963, we're down for repairs. Okay, this is 1963, November the 2nd. And I remember this date exactly in 1963 because that was the date Kennedy was killed. And I know we were down for repairs because our boss, Ray Charlton, came up there and informed us that Kennedy had been killed. And I know exactly where I was standing on Brutus in the back end of it there when he told us. And still had maintenance in 1967. Robbins drill. You got a picture of the Robbins drill, 770, 1850, and 85B. And by that time, we had second and third shift electricians that made a big difference, But in 1967, in November, P&M bought a 1250W dragline, 35-yard, from Benjamin Colt Company in Pennsylvania, and hired a company from West Kentucky called West Kentucky Steel to dismantle and move to Missouri. And it was, at the time, it was scheduled to go to the brand new mine. Empire District Electric Company was building a new power plant over near Office. And P&M got the contract to furnish the coal, and this dragline was to go over there. But somewhere along the line, they changed their mind and sent the 1250, or they wanted the 1250, which is a 35-yard dragline, to Brutus, or to Mine 19, and then they would move the 770 from Mine 19 over to the Empire Mine. That's what they did. The 770 was a 21-yard, and evidently they figured out that 21-yard machine over there was enough to dig enough coal to supply the Empire power plant. And the requirements for the Empire power plant was 100 ton per hour, the way I remember.
Now, a lot of how they determined what machine they needed depended on how deep the veins were that they wanted.
Yeah.
If it's too deep, the shovel won't do any good because it can't move it away far enough, right?
Yeah, that's getting real deep. I think the deepest we went with Brutus was around 65 feet, and it it wanted, at 65 feet.
Uh-huh.
But it, get 20, 30, 40 feet, it could scoot through it pretty quick. So anyway, this 1250 was in Pennsylvania. And it was owned by Benjamin Coal Company, and evidently they'd went out of business or something, and P&M bought it. It turned out to be a real nice machine. And Empire was building a 205 megawatt plant, and P&M had the contract to furnish the coal. Okay, 1967, West Kentucky Steel didn't have an electrician, and so they asked P&M if they would furnish an electrician to go there to tear the electrical out, So my foreman come to me and he said, would you be interested in going to Pennsylvania to tear out the electrical, And so what damn ass in his right mind would want to go to Pennsylvania in the mountains in the wintertime when it's always below freezing and a lot of times below zero with no heat on a steel machine? Sign me up. What time does the bus leave? Besides, I've got experience.
You were still a young man, though. You were a pretty young man,
67,
yeah.
33 to 67. Okay, so I had a old Ford pickup to drive with ball tires. In those days, you didn't stick Lincoln's head in the tread, see how much you had left. No. You drove until you looked like my head,
Yeah, you drove it till you saw the cords.
Yeah.
You start seeing cords generally. You got to do something.
I thought since P&M wanted me to go to Pennsylvania, it's a good time to talk about a new set of tires. So they were hesitant.
Well, hopefully they gave you enough extra for going.
They split the difference with me. They wouldn't put front ones on, but they put snow tires on the back, so that was a big help. Split the difference with me. And so 1967 in November, I drove to Lodge, Pennsylvania, and we were to stay at a deer lodge close to where this dragline was. And we were going to start the following Monday, and I think it was a Sunday when we got there. But anyway, I would be the only stranger. The other guys were all from Kentucky, and they all knew each other and worked for Gooch and West Kentucky Steel. And there was, I think, 5 of them, total, and me, so there were 6 of us, but I was the only stranger. They all 5 knew each other. One of them come in and said he was sick. So they talked about him being sick. He said, I need to see a doctor. So they figured out to take him to the doctor. So I went with them, just load up, just get acquainted with him and everything. Went to the doctor. I don't know if we went to the emergency room or where we went. Anyway, they found a doctor. And the nurse or whatever come in to take his vitals or find out what he wants. Said, what do you need a doctor for? I said, well, I got a strain. And so got him to see the doctor. And so when he come out, we loaded up and went, and the doctor had a different diagnosis. He had to clap, and they give him a shot of penicillin. And he went to work with us the next day. Okay, so where are we at now? These guys were good, hard workers, hard living, hard driving, fun guys to be around, and also very good poker players, because we stayed at this lodge, and in the evening we played poker. Pretty good poker players.
What, did you lose some money up there, did you?
Well, no, it was probably 50-cent limit or quarter limit or something like that, so it couldn't have been too bad.
Yeah.
And another thing, there was a local beer we drank called Old Latrobe.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all that bad, but I got to call it an old latrine. And then another thing, in the evening we was there, we'd drink old latrine and eat deep fried shrimp in stale oil at the lodge. I don't think they'd changed in 6 weeks.
No, they ain't changing that oil. That's bad. That oil, no, that's no good.
Okay, in 1967, I'm still up there, but P&M gonna fly me home for Christmas. So I think we got 3 or 4 days off. Them guys, I guess, drove back to Kentucky anyway. I flew back to Kansas and home for Christmas to be with the family. And then after Christmas, and I think I got a day after too or whatever it was. Anyway, I was to fly back to Pennsylvania. So my wife took me over to Joplin Airport to fly back to Pennsylvania, and got there and said the flight's canceled. Said stewardess is sick. We can't fly without a stewardess. And so, okay, go back home. Said come back this afternoon. Said maybe we can go then. So we'll come home. And I lived in Columbus at the time. So that afternoon we went back to Joplin. Sure enough, they had a stewardess, and I got on board. It was a DC-3, the only time I'd ever flown a DC-3 to St. Louis.
Douglas, that's a DC Douglas aircraft, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay, we got there and we boarded the flight from St. Louis to Pittsburgh. And hell, when I got on my seat, I was in first class, window seat in first class. There's a coal miner with all these rich people up there in first class in the window seat. What the hell? P&M's real good to me, What have I done? And make it long story short, I got to figuring it wasn't P&M that done that. It was that sick stewardess, Here. Yeah. They probably had to book me on another flight than the one I was scheduled on, which would have been coach.
Oh, there was no room in the coach, so they put you in.
So they probably had a spare seat in first class, and I got to be in first class. Well, there I am, coal miner in first class. So wasn't long, a black guy come sit beside me in the seat next to me, well dressed, and the plane took off, and of course, that time when flying was fun, you didn't have to take your shoes or belt off or be x-rayed or nothing. You just showed them your credentials and got on board and went. And so when the no smoking sign went off, I thought, well, I'd strike up a conversation with him. I pulled out my cigarettes and offered him a cigarette. He said, no, thanks, I don't smoke. So what do you do? He said, I'm a professional athlete. You are? What sport? Baseball. What do you know? Who with? St. Louis Cardinals, left field, Lou Brock. Oh man, this is great, I said, I got 3 boys in Little League. I said, would you give me your signature? He said, sure. So he reached in his vest pocket, he pulled out three photographs of himself, and he signed each one of them. I think there's one still going. I think the other 2, a couple of them burned up. I know when John's house burned up, it burned up with it. But anyway, I not only got photographs from him, I got to talk with him, for an hour and a half, whatever time it took to go from St. Louis to Pittsburgh. And I don't remember his cause for going, because it wasn't baseball season. This would have been in December.
Yeah, this is the off season now. He's still several months away from going to spring training.
Yeah. So this would have been in December, well after Christmas. And he had said it was something to do with basketball, but that's all I remember of the conversation. It had something to do with basketball. Anyway, we got back to the lodge then, and the boys from Kentucky, and we went to work for 2 or 3 days before New Year's. So New Year's coming up, and when New Year's come up, we got to talking, and we're going to sit there and eat stale shrimp and drink Old Latrine, or we'll go somewhere. So we thought, hell, we'll go somewhere, for New Year's Eve. And I don't know where we went. We all loaded up. And I didn't have a car. It was one of their cars. I had mobile pickup, so one of their cars. I don't know what town we went in, but we was looking for a place to go. And we were driving around. Pretty soon I seen a sign that said Italian American Club. I said, hell, stop there,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a big thing in a lot of eastern cities, the Italian American clubs.
Yeah. So
I think they're still going. I think they still have those.
I'll imagine, yeah. So I said, let me out here. I'll go talk to him. I went up there and said, I explained the situation to him. Oh, come on in, So 6 coal miners or 5 or 6 coal miners, whatever it was. We got to spend the New Year's Eve with the Italians in the Italian-American Club, you know, talking and drinking.
I bet that was great.
Great time.
Yeah.
And so we had to get back to the lodge because we had to work New Year's Day, you know, so get a few hours sleep before we go. And so after all lang syne, we all loaded up and headed back to our deer lodge. And by the way, at that deer lodge, we'd rush to get home after work because after the first shower, there were no more hot showers. It was lukewarm showers. So I don't know how big a thing
Oh
they had.
boy.
But anyway, we leave the Italian-American lodge and we start to get out of town, and I'm in the back seat on the passenger side, and the guy in the front seat in the passenger side starts rolling down the window. What the hell is he doing? It's cold in here, you know. And pretty soon he sticks his arm out the window and bam, bam, bam with his 38, you know, before we get out of town. Pulls his arm back in, sticks his 38 in his pocket. And then we go back to the lodge. Of course, we go to work New Year's Day. Okay, so after that, okay, 1968, January, I finished my work. Oh, by the way, Gooch should give me one of his guys was assigned to me. His name was Roger. So Roger helped me all the way through. I don't remember his last name.
He went with you up there and stayed with you up there and everything?
Well, Roger was his man from Kentucky. He's one of the Kentucky boys.
Oh, okay.
But he assigned him to me. He didn't have to do work with the other guys. You know, he worked with me all the time.
Okay.
Even when we come back and put it back together, Roger helped me. So. 1968, I finished my work in Pennsylvania and drove home. And that was another thing, you know, there's a lot of deer around there. And I thought, man, it would be nice to have a deer, bring a deer back home. Well, hell, the Kentuckians, they was all too willing to kill a deer for me. And we were gonna gut it, you know, and throw it in the back of my pickup, stuff it full of snow, and pack the back of the truck with snow so keep the deer and nobody'd see what I had.
Good traction.
Huh?
Good traction. You get a little weight on there.
Yeah, but that didn't come about. But we discussed it. It would have been real easy to do. They'd have shot a deer for me in a minute, you know, with no license.
Oh.
Okay, January, finished my work in Pennsylvania and drove home. P&M decided to keep the 1250B at mine 19 and send the 770 to Asbury. Johnson was the president. So brought all the pieces back in 1968, rewired the 1250, started up summer of 1968. Johnson was still president. 1969, January the 20th, Nixon became president, and I went to work with maintenance cables. Okay, there again, July of 69, Men on the Moon, and you know, talking about the connection with the transporter and everything, that the transporter that delivered the rocket to put the men on the moon was built by Marion Power Shovel Company. So,
Yeah.
but we'd talked about it way back then. So maintenance on that, okay. In 1973, P&M announced they would be shutting Mine 19 down. And also, that's when our sixth child was born. I was 39 years old, so we had six at 39. Coal shut down. Loaded the last car of coal in April of 74. And you've got the article in the Parsons Sun about I think the people or the county was glad to get rid of us. And P&M kept senior people to finish up odd jobs at the mine. After the mine had shut down, you know, you had to keep your senior people if there was any lift work. Well, I was a senior electrician, so they kept me, and So I worked from when they shut down till June of 1974, Friday, June the 28th. That was my last day at P&M. And so I quit P&M on a Friday, June the 28th. And P&M hadn't given me much hope about where to go. I think they had a job, they said, in Wyoming on third shift or something like that. And I thought, heck, I can do better than that. I knew the chief electrician, Peabody Company. And I called him up, told him my situation. He said, where do you want to go to work? Missouri or Oklahoma? I said, give me Oklahoma. So I went and applied at Oklahoma and did all the paperwork. I quit P&M Friday, June the 28th. That was the last day with P&M. Saturday, June the 29th was my first day with Peabody. Never missed a day's work. And besides that, it was time and a half day.
Yeah.
Nixon resigned August the 9th, 1974. Okay, here it is, March 2024. Only two of the crew from Mine 19 that were there from start to finish are left. Luigi, Gigi Saqueta, and me. Gigi will be 100 in October, and I will be 91 in October. And that's the end of my story for Mine 19.
Well, thank you very much, Carmen. That's great. That's great. You know, there's a lot of chronology, you know, the series of events that have gone on.
Yeah.
And you've covered a lot. And I know we've got more to do, but this was wonderful. I appreciate it. Real nice, Carmen.
Okay,
Appreciate every bit of it.
You're welcome.
Here's Carmen working with Big Brutus in the pit. You can see the bucket there in the background and some of the other equipment they used in the pit. And this is one of Carmen's pay stubs from 1967. This is for 1 week, and his base rate was $3.79 an hour, and how much he made at regular rate, at overtime rate, and at double time. This is a wedding photo of Norvella Melton and Carmen Boccia. This is Carmen at his 90th birthday party at Big Brutus. Go on ahead, Carmen.
Okay, anyway, I was over at Leeper's house, and Darlene Leeper, who was a Scot, her mother was there, who would have been about the same age as my mother, maybe a little older. But anyway, we were talking about old mineral days, and she said she remembered going to mineral one day, and they had these men on the sidewalk in front of the funeral parlor, and they had their shoes and socks off, and they had the rest of their clothes on. And she asked her mother why their feet were white and the rest of them were black. And these were some of the men that had been killed in the Stone City mine disaster. And I didn't realize that at the time. I had really never heard much about the Stone City blast, which killed 26 of them. But they probably had so many that they had to bring them to mortuaries in different towns, and they had some of them, and I don't know exactly how many she said, or if she even knew, because she would have been a youngster at that time. And this happened in 1916, so my mom was born in 1907, so if she was about the same age as my mom, she'd have been probably 8 or 9 at the time. And that's the story as I remember it.
And that's the Stone City disaster. 26 men died in that.
26, yeah. Not instantly. I think some of them died after they got them out, you know, but some died inside the mine, some died outside the mine. But I think it was 26 total, if I remember it right.
And this is typical of a mining explosion. There was the deaths from the explosion, and then there was deaths from suffocation, from inhalation of dust particles and all.
Yeah, and injured so bad, you know, that they couldn't recover.
Uh-huh. All right, thank you, Carmen. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Carmen, I hear you had an accident when you were a kid out at Lake Mineral. What do you got on that?
Okay, well, a buddy of mine and I was cutting lawn at the Catholic Church in Mineral, and it was August the 24th, 1948. And we got hot. We decided we'd go swimming and then come back and finish our lawn mowing. So we went to Mineral Lake and had our trunks with us, went swimming, and got out and started to come back. Well, and here come a bunch of girls. You know, well, hell, we can't go mow lawn now with all them girls coming. So we went back swimming again, and so I was kind of showing off how I could dive, you know, from this tower, and I did a swan dive off the top, hit the bottom, and all of a sudden I went from fully active to where I couldn't do anything at all, couldn't move anything, blink my eyes about all. And so I had a pretty good body mass index at the time, and I couldn't float even with lungs full of air. And so the water was murky, and I thought, well, I'll let out a few bubbles and they can find out where I'm at, because I couldn't move anything. And I let out a few bubbles and nobody came. And so I only had a few more bubbles left, and I let out some more. And a buddy of mine boosted me up, and they seen the terror look on my face when I went back down that something was wrong, and they got me out. So lucky I didn't drown in the first place. But,
So you went through quite a recovery process to get to where you could function normally.
They took me they come and got my dad. They wanted to come and get him, and I said, no, I'll be all right in a little bit, but I wasn't all right. And they seen that, and they came and got him, and he came and picked me up in the pickup and put me in the back of the pickup, brought me home, and called Doc McKee from Pittsburgh. Well, I think Doc McKee was in McCune at the time. And he said, well, bring him to the hospital. So we didn't have a car, so borrowed the neighbor brought his car down, and me and two of my buddies got in the back seat, or I didn't get in the back seat. They put me in the back seat with two of my buddies. My dad and Joe McCarry was the driver of the car, and took me to the hospital. And make a long story short, it was a hectic time. I spent 51 days, 22 hours, and 15 minutes in the hospital, and they sent me home in an ambulance. There was no...
Now, where would that hospital be? Which hospital was it?
Old Mount Carmel.
The Old Mount Carmel up there towards Frontenac, almost.
Yeah, room 405.
Now, were you walking when you came out of there?
No, I couldn't walk. They brought me home in an ambulance, and I had to learn to walk at home. And I think this was in October, and I think it was November before I could move around enough to go to school. So I went back to school in November.
And, but you recovered enough to have a full life, a full profession, and do everything later. But it was a long road to recovery.
I lucked out.
Yeah. Well, thanks for telling me that story, Carmen. I know I've heard parts of it here and there, and I appreciate you telling me.
Okay.